Hello YouTube, I'm Anna and welcome to my Hamlet vlog. I'm filming this on the same day that I'm posting it, so that's why I look like this. There was so much stuff to go through, so this was going to originally take you through like everything that I had to talk about that we talked about in my class, but it just got to be too long and so much of it I found was actually constructive to me, and so it might be constructive for you too. But I will be posting a second video where I talk about the two films we watched. So I hope you enjoy, and don't feel like you have to watch the whole thing. You can just like skip around. I'll probably put some timestamps down below so you can skip to where you want to like hear me talk about things. Okay, enjoy. The Tragedy of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. So your girl is back. It's October because I read the first two acts today, and I'm here to share some of the things with you. Our theme is revenge, and basically three revenge plots that perfectly mirror each other or very similar to each other. Hamlet going after the king, which is obviously like the A story. Towards the end, Laertes goes after Hamlet, which is like the B story. Fortinbras going after Denmark, which is like the C story. And they're all trying to revenge their father for reasons like love and honor and land. And so we first hear about Fortinbras in Scene 1, Act 1, Scene 1. I'm good at Shakespeare. So they're like, what the fuck is the ghost doing here? Horatio says, that can I. At least the whisper goes so on that our last king, whose image even but now appeared to us, was, as you know, by Fortinbras of Norway, thereto pricked on by a most emulate pride, dared to the combat, in which our valiant Hamlet, for so this side of our known world esteemed him, did slay this Fortinbras, who by a sealed compact, well ratified by law and heraldry, did forfeit with his life all those his lands which stood seized of to the conqueror. Against the which a moiety competent was gauged by our king, which had returned to the inheritance of Fortinbras, had he been vanquisher, as by the same commart and carriage of this article designed his fell to Hamlet. Now Sir young Fortinbras of unapproven metal, hot and full, half in the skirts of Norway, here and there sharked up a list of lawless resolutes for food and diet to some enterprise that hath a stomach in it, which is no other, as it doth well appear unto our state, but to recover of us by strong hand and terms compulsory those foresaid lands so by his father lost. And this, I take it, is the main motive of our preparations, the source of this our watch, and the chief head of this post-haste and rummage in the land. So they want to know what the ghost is doing in Denmark, and Horatio says, well, you remember Fortinbras? Well, his son, Fortinbras, he's upset. His uncle is now the king, but because Hamlet killed his father in a truly dignified manner, and wants to take back the land that his father lost. The ghost is here to watch over Denmark and protect it. Revisit this same theme about Fortinbras. He's very close to Denmark. He's in Poland. And Claudius says, now follows that you know young Fortinbras, holding a weak supposal of our worth, or thinking by our late dear brother's death our state to be disjoined and out of frame, dream of his advantage, he hath not failed to pester us with message, importing the surrender of those lands lost by his father with all bands of law. Have writ to Norway, uncle of young Fortinbras, who, impotent and bedrid, scarcely hears of his nephew's purpose to suppress his further gate here, and that in the levies of the list the full proportions are all made out of his subject. And you know, we just have to ask, like, what is the ghost like actually doing in Denmark? Is it actually Hamlet's father? Like, what's going on? Like, Hamlet in a few scenes will like again and again like be just like, I don't know what the ghost is doing here, and I don't know what his intentions are, but I still have this duty to avenge my father regardless of whether this ghost is a demon, and like, you gotta be smarter than that, you know what I mean? We see that Hamlet is mad as hell about it all. He feels powerless to do anything about it, because he's got a duty to his father, but he's also got a duty to Denmark, and I think that this is really exemplified in one of my favorite lines from Hamlet, which is Act 1, Scene 2. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but brave my heart, for I must hold my tongue. We see again that Hamlet really wants to, that Hamlet believes something is suspicious, and he really wants to get to the bottom of it regardless of what is happening. Okay, so Act 1, Scene 3 is Ophelia's scene. So it's the one scene in the first part of the play, before like all the shit happens, that we get to see Laertes, and then he disappears for like 3 acts, and both Laertes and Polonius are very concerned that Hamlet is taking advantage of Ophelia, and that she's gonna like get pregnant and have sex, and then everybody's gonna know, and then their life is over, her life is over, so they're really concerned about that. But the reason I think is very interesting is that like Laertes was warning her that like Hamlet's not going to be able to marry her. He doesn't have the freedom that that regular men do, that if Ophelia got herself in trouble, they would just marry her, but Hamlet doesn't have that kind of freedom. So Laertes says he may not, as unvalued persons do, carve for himself, for on his choice depends the safety and health of this whole state. And then just a few lines later, for Lord Hamlet believes so much in him that he is young, and with a larger tether may he walk than may be given you. And I find that really interesting because Hamlet is both more free and less free than Ophelia, but Ophelia is free in her position, as in her position, like as her status, because she's not technically nobility. And Hamlet feels trapped like that, and he will admit that he feels trapped by his station, but Ophelia's trapped by her womanness. And also they were right, like Ophelia should be worried about Hamlet. Also, Hamlet's a lot more about honor and like reputation than I necessarily think I always give it credit for. Like in Act 1, Scene 4, Hamlet talks about like the tradition of getting super wasted, and he seems less upset about the tradition itself, though he does feel apart from it, and like it's one of the things that he doesn't like about his uncle. But also he doesn't like the way that it makes other people view Denmark, and his main complaint is that nobody ever takes their wins seriously, and just like of course you lost, you're drunk all the time. And so the play becomes a lot more about honor and reputation and how people see you, and obviously it's about performing in a certain way than it was before. And then the ghost appears, and Hamlet immediately is savvy to the fact that this might not be exactly who he says he is. Horatio and Marcellus don't want Hamlet to follow the ghost for good reason. They're like, it's a ghost. And Hamlet, truly amazing, a remarkable young man, says, why? What should be the fear? I do not set my life at a pin's fee, and for my soul what can it do, that being a thing immortal as itself? Like, I know, like, somehow this is more upsetting than when Hamlet, like, turned to face the audience and was like, I wish I could die. I'm actively suicidal, but I will not kill myself because I'm afraid of hell. And it's more upsetting than when he does it in Act 3. What? And Horatio was like, listen, boy. He literally is like, you need to stay here with the group, stay with the group. And Hamlet doesn't, but Horatio's like, you need to, because like he could drive you crazy. Like, and there assume some other horrible form which might deprive your sovereignty of reason and draw you into madness. And like Hamlet does do a lot of like play acting madness, but he's also like crazy. Like he's not in a good place initially, and not all of his madness is fake or an act. Okay, Act 1, Scene 5. The ghost is telling Hamlet what the fuck happened. We get an image of repeating like Hamlet Senior is tied inextricably to the throne, so whatever happens to him, and then of course what happens to Hamlet is what happens to all of Denmark. That Hamlet one of the reasons Hamlet feels so trapped in Denmark is because he doesn't want people to look at him as if he's the whole face of Denmark, and he wants to be like an individual. He can't do shit about it, you know, but he also feels really trapped to the legacy of his father and avenging his father. So regardless of what he wants himself, he has to take vengeance on Claudius. We get an image in the same speech of the ghost of Claudius pouring poison into his ear. That's an image that's frequently in Shakespeare. We see it in Othello, we see it in Macbeth, so those are the last two plays I've read for Shakespeare performed. And I think it's important to maybe understand that the ghost is talking about what happened to Hamlet Sr., but he's also not necessarily he doesn't necessarily have the best intentions towards Hamlet, and I think you might want to consider that the ghost is poisoning Hamlet's mind. Right off the bat, we get a scene that's usually omitted from productions and adaptations of Hamlet because it seems pretty inconsequential, but there are a couple of interesting things going on in this scene. So the scene is between Polonius and his man Reynaldo, and he's asking Reynaldo to go spy on Laertes for him, and he wants to make sure that Laertes isn't fucking up his reputation too much. So again, we've got this theme of reputation and honor that's really prevalent in Hamlet. All the characters in this play are they're like young academics, and they want to like find their place in the world, and that's why I think like Hamlet's a really powerful play for like lots of people, because even though our dads haven't been killed by our uncles and we're not about to become the king of Denmark, or we would be except our uncle stole our throne, like we do feel kindred to Hamlet because he feels very trapped. Polonius asks Reynaldo to go spy on Laertes and to like spread rumors about him so that he might find out exactly what Laertes has been up to. And he says, "Your bait of falsehood take this carp of truth, and thus do we of wisdom of end of reach with windlasses and with assays of bias by indirections find directions out." This is truly amazing, because we know that Claudius, we learn later on in the play that Claudius has killed the king, that he has more or less killed the king in the way that the ghost said it, but that doesn't necessarily actually mean that the ghost is Hamlet Sr., that he can get Hamlet to do his bidding because he knows that Hamlet isn't going to just take his word at face value without checking it out, and but because the ghost was telling him the truth, Hamlet basically comes to this resolution like, I guess it doesn't matter whether or not the ghost was really my father. He was still telling the truth, and my uncle's still a bad guy, and he deserves to die. And then we get to see some of Hamlet's like preoccupation with being virtuous and being honest. He's afraid for Ophelia's future. Obviously not going to conceive anybody who's not a liar. And maybe he's a little pissed, you know what I mean? Like, he's a little pissed at his mom, he's a little pissed at Ophelia. And when he's talking to Polonius, we've switched to prose. I don't know if you can see, but like, that's not verse anymore. He was speaking in verse in the first act, and for most of the second act he speaks in verse, and I don't really remember that in prose, and I don't really remember that from before, and I think that's a pretty good indication that Hamlet is doing badly, or at least wants to give the appearance of not being as organized in his thoughts as he usually is, because Hamlet doesn't just speak in verse, he speaks in unbelievably intricate verse, and he still is playing word games when he's speaking in prose, but they kind of are not as tight. And I think it's really interesting that he speaks in prose when he's being mad. And, you know, he tells people he's not crazy, which is stupid as hell of him to do. I'm gonna skip over the player's speech because I don't really know what to make of it. The player's speech that he gives at Hamlet's request, not the one Hamlet writes. But it does mirror Hamlet's. I think it also mirrors Hamlet's, like, quest for revenge. He feels so trapped in himself, and not just in his station, but in his inability to express himself, and maybe not being able to for various reasons, just maybe because he's bad at it, and also because there is a responsibility that he has not to. He only is allowed to be mourning for 1 month, and then you've got to like run the country, and you've got to be a public figure, and he doesn't have the temperament for that, and he feels like the fact that he has all these feelings is trapping him, and the fact that he can't express them the way he needs to is trapping him. And like he fully knows that the ghost might be abusing him to damn him, and it may not be what it seems, but he has to find out, and now he's trapped in this game where he like doesn't know what he's supposed to do about anything. Anyway, so that was Act 1 and 2. I'll probably do Act 3 later. I'm reading Act 3. I just started, and sometimes there are these exchanges that are like wild, and Polonius gives the book to Ophelia and says, "Read on this book, that show of such an exercise may color your loneliness. We are oft to blame in this, 'tis too much proved, that with devotion's visage and pious action we do sugar o'er the devil himself." And Claudius says, as an aside, "Oh, 'tis too true, how smart a lash that speech doth give my conscience. The harlot's cheek, beautied with plastering art, is not more ugly to the thing that helps it than is my deed to my most painted word. Oh, heavy burden." Hey, what's happening here? One thing that's really interesting about Claudius is that it's not like remorse. Like, he would do it again. But also, it's not like he feels totally cool about, like, murdering his brother, and, like, also, it's really interesting that Claudius actually has a lot of the same feelings that Hamlet does, or at least, like, after his to be or not to be speech, he does the Get Thee to a Nunnery, and, like, one part that's usually cut out of the Get Thee to a Nunnery is the part where Hamlet, like, talks about, like, Ophelia wearing makeup, and it's about, like, Hamlet has this, like, preoccupation with people's, like, Claudius uses, like, the same language, that almost the exact same language that Hamlet's going to use in a few lines to talk about how he feels he's deceiving people. I think that's what's happening here. I find this speech has, like, little to do with, like, what's happening in Hamlet, except for, like, the part where Hamlet's listing, like, the things that you would, like, rather die than deal with. The oppressive wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the influence of office, the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes. Like, especially that last one, I feel like is, like, a dig at Claudius, especially in particular. But otherwise, just more of Hamlet being a coward. And I don't find it that important, and I think if it wasn't, like, so famous of a speech, and I don't know that it's famous because it's important, just because it's pithy. Like, a lot of what is really famous from Hamlet is a lot of what Polonius says, which, like, I find hilarious, because what Polonius says is usually nonsense, and it's usually from his speech that he gives to Laertes at the beginning of the play. Like, never a borrower or a lender be, like, bad. I got these Hamlet temporary tattoos for my roommate, and there's 10 quotes, 6 quotes on them. He is the soul of wit is Polonius. The rest of silence is sad and super depressing. I don't know why you would put it on your skin even for a hot second. Oh, one of them's words, which, like, maybe I'm just stupid and I don't understand what that means. Also, I have these in. from Laertes. Two of them are from Laertes, Polonius' speech to Laertes. Two of them are from Polonius' speech to Laertes, and one of them is from a different speech of Polonius's. Like, Hamlet, like, isn't, like, about Hamlet. Isn't, like, about what's going on in Hamlet, necessarily. And, like, and so I think To Be or Not to Be, in a lot of ways, fell into that same trap where there's a lot of more interesting things going on in Hamlet and a lot of more interesting speeches, but because it's saying something, like, it's saying so much, but it's not necessarily saying a lot about this play, is what I'm just getting at. So when Hamlet gives the soliloquies, he's speaking in verse, and when he's speaking to other people, he's speaking in prose, and I don't know if this is, like, for the rest of the play or not. I don't know why I never noticed that before. Am I an idiot? Did I notice it? I don't know. I don't know what it means. I also think, like, one of the reasons that I always feel like at the beginning of this scene, Ophelia is kind of playing along with him. So Hamlet says that if you be honest and fair, your honesty should admit no discourse to your beauty. And Ophelia, like, is like, what do you, stop it. She responds with, could beauty, my lord, have better commerce than with honesty? And then he's like, I never loved you. Love, his affections do not that way tend, nor what he spake, though it lacked form a little, was not like madness. So, Claudius is like, he's got it. He's like, knows what's up. So he's like, and he's like, oh man, even though Hamlet is kind of upset, he's not mad. This gets me to a nunnery speech, encounter, and whatnot. Often I've seen it done in, like, a handful of productions. They're, like, fully making out. They take a break. Hamlet does the first part of the speech, and he realizes that Polonius is spying on them, and that nothing Ophelia's doing is, in this moment, is genuine, and he already is like, women in general are so fucking fake. To have Ophelia come to him in, like, show of, like, remorse and, like, love, or, like, fake love, I don't know, like, whatever she's doing here, to have it just be like, JK, you're not here by your own intentions, and, like, I'm so angry. Because in the first part of the speech, it's about him, right? It's about, like, all men are bad, and they're not, like, there's no point in having anybody get married, or anybody be alive, or continuing the human race, because he's the best, and look at how terrible he is. Like, the first half of the speech is clearly about him, and he wants to protect Ophelia from this. But then the second half of the speech, at the end of the day, whether or not Hamlet and Ophelia slept together seems so far from, like, something that's kind of outside of, like, the scope of what Hamlet's doing. He's not worried about whether or not Ophelia can give him heirs. He's just mad at her in this part of the speech because, like, not because she's been sexually unfaithful to him, but because she's, like, emotionally cuckolding him, I guess. The way that he talked to Polonius in Act 2 about Ophelia not having children, that conceiving and understanding, like, the word is conception, and it's meant as both conception and, like, having a child, and conception as in, like, understanding, like, her having ideas is, like, dangerous for a woman, which makes me think that maybe Hamlet's a little pissed at her the whole time. Then he has this whole thing that's often cut out of, like, productions of Hamlet because it's, like, just blatant misogyny. And I feel like Hamlet, like, at least Hamlet as a violent misogynist is, like, very clear about what his damage is. And I always feel, and I definitely don't think I'll ever change my mind about this, but, like, I'm always gonna feel like Hamlet's main damage is that his mother is, like, living with his uncle, and she doesn't. I really think that comes across very clearly when he says, I say we will have no more marriages. Those that are married already, all but one shall live. which is like a really pointed dig at Claudius. He like truly decides to be serious about his revenge, and it's not just about like killing his dad, but also about his mother cuckolding his dad. Oh God, and my first revelation about Hamlet was, "It shall be so, madness and great ones must not unwatched go." Something about that, I was like, why would Hamlet pretend to be crazy? Wouldn't that just draw a target on his back and like make people wary of like what he was gonna do? Like, it doesn't make sense as like a tactical move. And I was like, Hamlet truly doesn't want to kill the king, and he doesn't want to be in Denmark anymore. And we've got more like ear imagery in at the end of Act 1, Act 3, Scene 1. Polonius is saying that they should let Hamlet talk to his mother before they send him away. Let her be round with him, and I'll be placed, so please you, in the ear of all their conference. And like, Hamlet gets all riled up about his mom again because of Polonius and interfering. Thou art even as just a man, as e'er my conversation coped withal. Hamlet says, Horatio, you are the most just man I have ever met. I don't think I've ever like fully felt this in my heart, so I'm going to read it to you right now. Nay, do not think I flatter, for what advance may I hope from thee, that no revenue hast but thy good spirits to feed and clothe thee? Why should the poor be flattered? No, let the candied tongue look absurd pomp, and crook the pregnant hinges of the knee, where thrift may follow fawning. Dost thou hear? Since my dear soul was mistress of her choice, and could of men distinguish her election, sheth sealed thee for herself, for thou hast been as one, in suffering all, that suffers nothing. A man that fortune's buffets and rewards has taken with equal thanks. And blessed are those whose blood and judgment are so well committed, that they are not a pipe for fortune's finger to sound what she pleases. Nothing Hamlet ever says to anybody is ever about them. It's always about himself. And it's like, I'm not flattering you because you can't give me anything, because I'm the king, and you're so fucking blessed because you don't have anything to give anybody, and your destiny isn't like intertwined with the fate of the whole fucking world, or at least of Denmark. Give me that man that is not passion slaves, and I will wear him in my heart's core, as I do thee. Interesting. It seems like the women in this play actually know what the fuck is going on, even Ophelia, who's like mad as hell. But like Gertrude is always like savvy to it. She's always like, Ophelia seems to be able to like keep up with Hamlet, you know? So after the play is like finished and whatnot, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern come in, and like he keeps like twisting everything Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is saying to him. The king, sir, I, sir, what of him? Is in his retirement marvellous distempered. With drink, sir, no, my lord, with choler. Your wisdom should show itself more richer to signify this to the doctor. For me to put him to his purgation would perhaps plunge him into more choler. Good, my lord, put your discourse into some frame, and start not so widely from my affair. I am tame, sir, pronounce. The queen, your mother, in most great affliction of spirit, hath sent me to you. Nay, good my lord, this courtesy is not of the right breed. If it shall please you to make me a wholesome answer, I will do your mother's commandment. If not, your pardon and my return shall be the end of my business. Sir, I cannot. What, my lord, make you a wholesome answer? My wit's diseased. I think Guildenstern is saying that he wants Hamlet to let him finish, so that Hamlet will like make him a whole answer. But Hamlet says, I can't make you a wholesome answer, as in like sane answer, because he's insane. And I always read it as like Hamlet like playing up like what people are perceiving him as, like they're perceiving that he's like completely gone off the deep end. But like also I think this moment can be played like really sad, and you can make it so that Hamlet is like he's not having as much fun in that one line as he is in the rest of the scene. And that he really feels like no matter what he does, like they're not gonna like his answer because his wit's diseased. And I think in like a modern setting, like it's really sad what's happening to Hamlet. Like he's like suicidal and like mentally ill. You can really like think about Hamlet's like thing as like he's got two main gripes, which is like the king killed his father and wed his mother, and like Hamlet has just revealed in his ridiculously dramatic play that he feels like that's as good as death. Like that's like such a sin, and like she's going to hell, or it's at least wrong. And I think what's like Hamlet doesn't talk about whether or not he's that mad that he's never gonna be the king, or he feels like something's been stolen from him, but he does a little bit in the to be or not to be speech, a little bit the first time he talks to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, but it's kind of always like buried in what like everything else that's going on. And when Rosencrantz like asks him like wrong, he's like, I lack advancement, and like that's true. Like Claudius doing these things like stole his throne, even though Claudius like tells him like that's okay. It was supposed to be his, and now it's not, and like he spent his whole life living like he was going to be king, and now he's never going to be king, and it's kind of like so sad. I'm so sad. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there for tonight. He's got this last soliloquy, which I will leave to you. I'll leave you with. 'Tis now the very witching time of night, when churchyards yawn and hell itself breathes out contagion of to this world. Now I could drink hot blood and do such bitter business as the day would quake to look on. Soft now to my mother. O heart, lose not thy nature, let not ever the soul of Nero enter this firm bosom. Let me be cruel, not unnaturals. I will speak daggers to her, but use none. My song and toll in this be hypocrites. How in my words some ever she be shent. To give them seals, never my soul consent. Hamlet is very convinced and concerned that he's maybe gone too far. I will see you tomorrow probably, and then I will see you on Thursday because it's the first day of Hamlet. Yay! Here we are in the third act, and shit's going down. Like, this is the most eventful part of the play. So fast, like all the way to Act 4 is like so much is happening in the beginning part, the end of Act 3 and the beginning of Act 4, and it's really very like a really cohesive and really dramatic story. It's my favorite part of Hamlet, and there's so much going on that's about Catholicism. So who was talking about it? Oscar Isaac was when he was doing Hamlet, which was last fall, I think he was doing Hamlet, or last spring, I don't really remember. And he was talking about Act 1, Scene 6, and in the version of Hamlet they were using, Oscar Isaac were using one that said, there are more things in heaven and earth ratio than are dreamt up in our philosophy, meaning the philosophy of the Catholic Church. Hamlet is somewhere, he's stuck in Protestant England, where the Catholic Church are changing, and he is really grappling with, he's grieving for his father, and also the idea that his father's in hell, or his father's stuck in purgatory, and he's worried that now the existence of purgatory is gone, so you either go to heaven or hell, then you don't get any time for your souls to, like, your sins be purged from your soul. His uncle's praying, and he's saying a lot of very Catholic things, like, my fault is in the past. So, you know, when you go to confession, if there's a priest present, Hamlet forgot the fact that there's not a priest present, so he's not really going to confession, is he? You can confess your sins, and in the event that you are truly remorseful, your sins are wiped clean, and you get to go to heaven because you've got a clean slate. And Claudius is worried in this scene that he can't be truly remorseful because he still has the things that he sinned for. The sin was murdering a brother. Also, this is a confession, so now it doesn't matter if the ghost is real or not because Claudius just confessed. Like, even though he didn't confess in a Catholic sense, he like confessed in a criminal sense, I guess. Like, if somebody was like trying to get him in jail, they could be like, yeah, you confessed to murder my friend. He really he expresses like the desire to repent, towards the end, so Hamlet thinks he can't kill him because then he'll just go to heaven, because Hamlet wants to damn his uncle. And I guess because, like, his father didn't get to confess all his sins before he went to die, he got killed, so he should afford his uncle the same generosity. I do remember in 11th grade when I read Hamlet for the first time, we also listened to an episode of This American Life, which actually might still be on my phone. Ho-ho!
WBEZ Chicago. It's This American Life. I'm Eric Glass. Okay, here's something that we did not expect. Check this out. This was recorded on a stage in Brooklyn, St. Francis College.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
We listened to this one episode of This American Life. It was about how there was this prison program all over the country, and they're performing Hamlet, and the prisoners, like, they were incarcerated men, and they were speaking about how this scene in particular was really moving for them because they, you know, obviously had committed a crime, and some of them had committed terrible, awful crimes, and then this gave them a chance to like repent in a way that was constructive and emotional, and that was really moving. I just thought that was interesting. I think it's episode 218 of This American Life. That's what it says. It says number 218. I was right. Hamlet doesn't want to kill Claudius if it means that Claudius doesn't get the same treatment as his father did when he died. Why, this is hire and salary, not revenge. I took my father grossly full of bread, with all his crimes broad blown, as flush as Mary, and how his audit stands, who knows save heaven? But in our circumstance and course of thought, 'tis heavy with him, and I am then revenged to take him in the purging of his soul when he is fit in season for his passage? No. Up, sword, I know thou art a more horrid hent. When he is drunk asleep, or in his rage, or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed, at game a swearing, or about some act that has no relish of salvation in it, then trip him, that his heels may kick at heaven, and that his soul may be as damned and black as hell whereto it goes. My mother stays. This physic but prolongs thy sickly days. Really interesting. Hamlet uses plural I, so he uses the collective and royal we lots of times to refer to himself. But in our circumstance and course of thought, 'tis heavy with him, and that's a collective and plural. But then it's a personal revenge. He doesn't know if Claudius is, only heaven can say if Claudius is really guilty. Hamlet, as the Prince of Denmark and as the son of the once king, knows that he's guilty, but personally I think he's saying he can't find revenge. He can't really consider it to be revenge. But he can't personally find revenge in the taking of Claudius's life in this instance because, you know what? Like, it would be cheap, and Claudius may go to heaven, and he can't risk it. He can't risk it. If he stayed, he'd know that Claudius is just a fucking liar, and he really likes banging his new wife. And we still have one more scene left in Act 3, and then I'm probably gonna read. Oh, it's due tomorrow. I'm probably gonna finish it tonight, I guess. It's due tomorrow. I could take the quiz though, and not like. I'm like 90% sure I could take a quiz about Hamlet and like get all the answers right. Okay. Yeah, Claudius just wants to bang his hot wife. Wow, it's been literally 2 seconds. And I wrote wow in my book because Melanie is suggesting that Gertrude has been protecting Hamlet for a few months. Gertrude's like, please, handle my own son. Wish people would let me handle my own son. Wish people would let her handle her own son. So here we are. It's the closet scene. You know, the scene where Hamlet and his mom don't fuck. He's real mad at his mom. You know, he's real mad at her. And I know he just said that he's not going to kill her, but he's violent or crazy enough in the scene that Gertrude is afraid enough for Polonius to reveal himself and Hamlet to kill Polonius and then ask, is it the king? No, it's not the king. And you know how I know it's not the king? Because you came from where the king was. Also, like when you're like Hamlet's fatal flaw is in action, and then you're like a junior in high school, so that's fine. You're like, oh, but he's an asshole. His actual, like, obviously, like Hamlet doesn't have a fatal flaw, and my Shakespeare prof is like, nah, son, that's what he says. Shakespeare tragic heroes don't have fatal flaws. They have an excess of virtue, and like, real talk, do they? But Hamlet, in particular, his excess of virtue is virtue itself. Hamlet's almost like, oh, a Good Place reference. Hamlet is almost like Chidi if Chidi were an asshole. So Chidi makes everybody miserable because he's like entrenched in his like Kantian ethics, and it makes everybody around him miserable because he's incapable of making a decision. And in a lot of ways, Hamlet's like that, but like Chidi's like not a bad person. He doesn't mean to make people around him miserable. Hamlet feels superior. Like he's the only person who's ever thought of any of these problems, and he doesn't want to make the world a better place. He wants to be good in a way that's really, really selfish, and doesn't care that he makes the people around him miserable. That's just like my 2 cents. Like Hamlet's excess of virtue is virtue. Like the virtue that has an excess of is virtue itself, is desire to be like this perfect person. And like he gets so hung up on the fact like he's not and nobody around him is, and also he's grieving, but like his dad is a ghost because he died and he didn't get to go to heaven, and he's got like otherwise like what otherwise be like Hamlet is just an overthinker and an asshole, and he knows what a tragedy is, which is all fine and cool. Also, one thing I was thinking about like months ago, Henry VIII married his dead brother's wife. I don't know what that means. It's just like a thought that I had, and I think I wanted to share it with all of you. I do know what it means. Actually, we talked about it in class. So when Shakespeare was writing, he probably would have wanted to be very careful not to endorse a marriage that looked a lot like the one that didn't result in Elizabeth's birth. So Henry's first marriage resulted in the birth of Bloody Mary, who was Elizabeth's half sister, but it would have been pretty dangerous to say that marriage is good and not wrong, and Mary was the legitimate Queen of England. So that's what's going on there. I was thinking while I was reading that, like in 11th grade, God, I love Hamlet. In 11th grade, we were talking about like why would Gertrude marry Claudius, and obviously like one reason is that she loves Claudius, and like Hamlet may not be up for that explanation because he's like, I don't know, you know how like teenagers whose parents get divorced have a harder time adjusting to it than younger kids. That's kind of where I feel like Hamlet's at emotionally, and he's never going to accept that his mom still is a human woman who, you know, sometimes human women have sex. Like, Hamlet is never going to accept that, like, Gertrude loves Claudius. She's, like, a character who's full of love. She's got lots of love to give. Here are 2 other reasons that Gertrude might have married Claudius. She wants to protect her position. And I think, you know, like, it's reasonable. She doesn't want to be taken from everything she's known for 25, 30 years. If you think you like are a good queen, you don't want to give that up. And if you want to be close to your family, you don't want to like give that up. Like she might never be able to see her son again. And one thing I believe, and I'll die on this hill, is that Gertrude loves Hamlet. And that brings me to my 3rd point. In marrying Claudius, right, Hamlet remains the most immediate to his throne. Like Hamlet has the best claim to the throne. It's unlikely that Gertrude will produce any more heirs since Hamlet's a full-grown adult. So it's unlikely that she'll have any more kids. And so Claudius will have no heirs. protecting Hamlet from being killed or being ousted and from his position. And if Claudius married somebody else could have a better claim to the throne. So, you know, this is just speculation, but like I really think one reason, and this is the reason that I think provides the most like interesting dynamic between Hamlet and Gertrude, is that regardless of Gertrude's feelings, she's not doing it for any selfish reason, not doing it out of love for Claudius, not doing it for like to protect her own position and her own station. She's doing it out of love for Hamlet. And she wants to protect Hamlet and possibly protect his life. Like, I don't know if y'all have seen, I mean, The Lion King, but I'm thinking Prince Caspian, where there's a pretty similar situation. Whereas kills Caspian the Ninth and usurps his throne as regent, but slowly gives himself more power and more or less waits to declare himself king until he has his own heir, and once he has his own heir, he wants to kill Caspian because there's now no reason. And I do think that that would be something that Claudius would perhaps consider. It would be at least a possibility to Gertrude, because as we talked about in Macbeth, not only do you want to be king, but you want to keep, like, you want your line to be king. I do think she married Claudius because she loves Hamlet, and I think when we get to the end of the play, I think the only really compelling reading of the moment where Gertrude drinks the poisonous goblet, like when she drinks the poison, is that she does it because she can't live with herself for putting her son through this, for believing in Claudius, and also maybe to expose him. She's the first one to die. Hamlet said at one point he would speak daggers but use none. And Gertrude then says, "Oh, speak to me no more, these words like daggers enter in my ears." Also, great ear imagery. It's always the same. It's always the same. It's 90% times the same. The ghost enters and Hamlet's like screaming at his mom, and the ghost is like, "Excuse me? You killed the wrong person. And now you're screaming at your mother. So, I'm gonna need you to but also he's like, "Oh, well, you know, since we're here, I think you can like make her stop sleeping with my brother," which is like, but the transition here, when it's like always like Hamlet screaming at his mom, he's like flipping out. Gertrude's crying, as you would be if your grown-ass son started screaming at you. You'd be like, "I'm gonna get murdered by my fucking son. My violent misogynist of a son did a terrible job." And then the ghost is like, "Hamlet, God." And then he just like, always, like, there's never a transition that I don't find hysterical when Hamlet says, "How is it with you, lady?" Because he's always like, "How is it with you, lady?" Like, he wasn't just screaming at her. And also then Hamlet, like, Gertrude's like, "You're insane. Like, you're like actually crazy. I thought you were just grieving. Turns out I was wrong." Hamlet really falls into this boy who cries wolf, like he needs people to now believe that he's seen the ghost, but like he's been pretending he's been fucking insane for 4 months, so nobody's gonna believe him. Let's wrap. That's the end of Act 3. It took a long ass time. It took like literally 2 days and like an hour and a half. There's like an hour and a half of footage that I have to like go through just for Act 3. I don't know how much of it's going to be in here, but one thing about Act 3 is that one thing about the closet scene in particular is that Hamlet, I don't want to see Hamlet fuck his mom anymore. You know what I mean? Like, Hamlet can't spend the whole play talking about like how much he hates incest and then like fuck his mom in a way that suggests that he's in love with her. That Hamlet was going to allow himself to have sex with her in a way that is because he wants to have sex with her. Now, in Act 4, I'll like skip ahead a little bit. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it. Act 4, Scene 3. Hamlet says, my mother, father, and mother is man and wife. Man and wife is one flesh, and so my mother. And then often, at least in this version of Hamlet that we're watching, starring Ethan Hawke, Hamlet kisses Claudius. Nope, Claudius. Hamlet kisses Claudius on the mouth, and I think in Campbell Scott, which I've seen a number of times because I find it truly entertaining. It's long. I've seen it in not one, but at like a minimum of twice. And they both came out around the same time. Hamlet kisses Claudius on the mouth as if he's kissing his mother. Now, what is happening? And this, I think, is not Hamlet wants to fuck his mom. Hamlet doesn't want to fuck his mom. We're like past that. Hamlet is an embodiment of all of Denmark. She's like the queen. If Hamlet became king, she'd be the queen mother. But Hamlet, I think in his mind that like what the king does is like applies to like everything that happens in the state. Okay, so what the king does, everything, it applies to everything that happens in the state. So if Claudius is incestuous, so is all of Denmark. And I think that's kind of like what Hamlet's thinking of. And also, like, in that same sense, in Act 4, Hamlet is like enacting this like what's the word I'm looking for? Like melding of persons. In this case, man and wife are one person, but king and state are one. And I just think, I don't really know. I think that if you were like, Hamlet's gonna mac on the queen, it can't be as Hamlet the individual, but as Hamlet the king of Denmark, as enacting Hamlet Senior's vengeance, as an extension of the incestuous Claudius, and not as Hamlet himself. Claudius now has like a reason to ship him away to England and like kill him, but because before he was like, Hamlet knows the jig is up and I gotta get him away from here before he kills me. It's like, now he's murdered somebody. But this is also like what he was afraid of, you know what I mean? This speech in Act 4, Scene 3, given by Claudius. I have sent to seek him and to find the body. How dangerous is it that this man goes loose? Yet must not we put this strong law on him? He is loved of the distracted multitude, who like not in their judgment but their eyes, and where 'tis so, the offender's scourge is weighed, but never the offense. To bear all smooth and even, this sudden sending him away must seem deliberate pause. Disease's desperate groan, but desperate appliance are relieved, or not at all. Okay, he's saying, like, people like Hamlet. Like, this is gonna be bad. We're back to, like, Hamlet, a play that's really about the appearance of these people in this station and what they are allowed and not allowed to do. Oh, from this time forth, my thoughts be bloody, or be nothing worth. That's enough for now. I still have half of Act 4 and Act 5, but Act 5 is like, it's only 2 scenes. Graveyard scene, fucking most hilarious scene in all of literature, and then the duel, Where did I leave off? So, here we are. Act 4, Scene 5, and it's Ophelia. She's gone mad. Horatius says, "'Twere good she were spoken with, for she may strew dangerous conjectures in ill-breeding minds. Appearance issues, how the public views you. We don't want Ophelia spreading rumors that are true." So, like, Ophelia's mad as hell. Like, she's crazy, but she's also, like, mad. Like, she's angry. And, you know, whether or not Ophelia is pregnant, she feels like she's been abandoned by Hamlet, and worse, she knows, I mean, everybody knows, that Hamlet is the one who killed her father, and so now she's without husband or father, What's she gonna do? Well, she still has a brother and whatnot, who we're getting to. And did they sleep together? Yes. Is she pregnant? Who's to say? And Laertes. Laertes is coming. He's coming from France. Claudius is very worried that everybody's going to be like suspicious, especially Laertes, of Polonius's death, because they were doing a very good job of covering it up. And Laertes being angry is something they're planning on. And they're hearing like Laertes is going to try to take the throne. And then he comes in mad as hell, as he should be. His life was like fine. He was like having a good time, living his young life in France. He's gone for like 4 months. And his sister is crazy, and his dad is dead, and his ex-best friend, Hamlet, has lost his mind and killed people. He's right now mad as hell at the king because he's like, this is his fault. Laertes is ready to usurp Claudius. That's how angry he is. And when he sees Ophelia has lost her mind, I love Laertes, and he doesn't deserve any of the shit that's happened to him. More than Hamlet. Act 5. I got a quote that I like. This is just a quote that I like. I learned like in the last 2 years that they don't bury people in front of their families anymore, because when they do, their brothers jump into their graves after them. So Ophelia's died. Very sad. We're very sad about the death of Ophelia. I know I just kind of skipped over it, but what else can be said that hasn't been said? You know, if they use her and they don't care about her, like after Hamlet screams at her, she's like, she's watching the play, but like just so Hamlet can make like dirty jokes in front of his mom, and then she disappears and then she dies. So Ophelia's dead. They're burying her. They don't want to bury her in the graveyard because she's definitely killed herself. And I think like if you were just reading like the Queen's speech and you didn't have all this extra information, you wouldn't be like totally sure that she didn't just slip. But the gravediggers and then the priest being like, we shouldn't even bury her here, make it pretty clear that Ophelia committed suicide, because Hamlet and Ophelia are a power couple, and like Laertes is beside himself, as he should be, and he says, lay her in the earth, and from her fair and unpolluted flesh may violets spring. I tell thee, churlish priest, a ministering angel shall my sister be when thou liest howling, which is great. But like Laertes like, fuck you, I'll see you in hell, which is only the second greatest I'll see you in hell that exists in this play. Quarto 1, which is the bad quarto, apparently, I don't know things, has a stage direction which I think was in the original one that I read, where Hamlet leaps into the grave after Ophelia. Now, this footnote says this, after Laertes, that this makes Hamlet the aggressor, would then like make a lot of what he says in this speech like weird and contradictory, although like if any character is going to be contradictory, it's going to be Hamlet. So in this scene, my favorite scene in all of Shakespeare, the scene where Hamlet leaps into the grave after Laertes, like to show off, like to like be like, you don't love her as much as I love her. In fact, he says that. He says, I loved Ophelia. For 40,000 brothers could not with all their quantity of love make up my sum. Like, Hamlet says that he doesn't, like, he wants Laertes to, like, stop choking him. Fair. But that doesn't mean he's not the aggressor. Plus, Hamlet has never taken responsibility for anything he does. He says later that he feels badly about the way that he treated Laertes in this scene, but he doesn't, like, actually apologize for it. So what I'm saying is, if you want Hamlet to leap into that grave after Laertes, you should do it. It's great. It's funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's funny in like a really sad way. And that's what I'm about. You know what I mean? I also think it's significant that Hamlet does not feel guilty for the death of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, even though he killed them. He fully killed them, and he doesn't care because they were villains. And I really, even at this point, when he's dropped most of the pretenses, and he's making some strides to be like, I need to take some responsibility for my actions, he's still so insufferable, and like, so, in this scene, Hamlet says, "But I am very sorry, good Horatio, that to Laertes I forgot myself. For by the image of my cause I see the portraiture of his. I'll count his favours, but sure the bravery of his grief did put me into a towering passion." So, what we get here is like two things. First of all, we get acknowledgement that Hamlet and Laertes are like foils, and that Laertes' story is mirroring Hamlet's, which is just so cool. I really think I'm right. Laertes is Hamlet if Hamlet wasn't so much in his own way. And they do talk in this scene that Hamlet thinks of himself as the king. At least at this point, he thinks he's the king, and he's gonna kill Claudius, finally, and he's gonna take over, which gives him the authority at the end to give Fortinbras the throne. However, right before they do their little thing, this is something I wanted to say for 5 years, okay? So let me say it. I'll never say it again. I can't make that promise. Hamlet looks Laertes in the eyes and says, "Give me your pardon, sir. I have done you wrong, but pardon it as you are a gentleman. This present knows, and you must needs have heard, how I am punished with a sore distraction. What I have done, that might your nature, honor, and exception roughly await, I here proclaim was madness. Was Hamlet wronged Laertes? Never Hamlet. If Hamlet from himself be ta'en away, and when he's not himself does wrong Laertes, then Hamlet does it not. Hamlet denies it. Who does it then? His madness? If it be so, Hamlet is of the faction that is wrong. His madness is poor Hamlet's enemy." Laertes more or less accepts this apology. He's like, "I forgive you personally." Again, great shit going on here with like the separation of like the duty to your father and to the state, because Laertes now has a claim to the throne too. Don't you forget it. And because one of the things Claudius promised him was the throne, knowing full well that Laertes would side with him. Laertes accepts it personally, but he doesn't accept it as Polonius' son, so he feels like he still needs to kill Hamlet. And this is like frustrating, because in a modern sense, Hamlet insists for 4 acts that his madness is not real. I know this isn't true, you know this isn't true, but a lot of it is play acting, if you will. And for him to like come out here, Laertes wasn't even here, and be like, actually the victim here. Your mental illness gives like a reason, it's like not an excuse. Like, just want Hamlet to know that in the 21st century, that shit doesn't fly with me. You still gotta take like responsibility for your actions and give your friend who you told you, just were like, I'm sorry. Like, it's upsetting to me as a 21st century woman who doesn't like when men don't give real apologies. Laertes is like, why is Hamlet still alive? And he's like, first of all, he's not still alive. He should be dead. Second of all, the reason I couldn't kill him was because, well, have you met the queen? She loves her son, and that feels so validating to me. That, like, everything Gertrude is doing is for Hamlet. That's my piece of advice for you. She does everything she does is for Hamlet. And when they're coming up with this plan to kill Hamlet, it has to be a plan where it won't look like Polonius. Claudius has orchestrated it for Hamlet to die. Like, it can't be Claudius is doing. Hamlet's death can't be Claudius' doing, because he loves Gertrude. You know, when sometimes bad guys in plays are uncomplicated villains, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're very complicated villains who love their wife and maybe even their brother and possibly their nephew, who's a huge pain in the ass, and he's gonna kill Hamlet because Hamlet is too much work. But I do think Claudius loves Hamlet. Also, the second reason is the public really likes Hamlet. He's probably just like this nice academic. They seem to think he'd make a really good king, which is something 17-year-old me was tardily against that notion. He'd be a terrible king. But no, he'd be a good king. I mean, he's perfectly balanced and crazy and compassionate. Today's Wednesday, October 24th. Tomorrow is Thursday. It's our first Hamlet day. And my roommates are home, so perfect timing. I'll see you tomorrow night. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. Or, in the New International Version, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. So that's Romans 12:19, speaking pretty succinctly on whether or not we should take revenge. And so we want to ask, when we read Hamlet, what is Shakespeare saying about revenge? And there are, as I've said, 3 characters who want to take revenge for the death of their fathers, and 2 of them die. Fortinbras, who is rebuked and listens to his uncle when his uncle pulls him out of Poland to not attack Denmark. He, listens, which I find suspect, since he was in Poland fighting a stupid war that Hamlet doesn't understand, that the captain doesn't understand, and he lives and he gets Denmark. Somehow Laertes comes out worse. Laertes dies, and that's it for Laertes. But Hamlet dies, and he loses everything. But Horatio implies that he's going to heaven, and I mean, really the only reason that Horatio would say that is because he's a gay disaster. Horatio implies that Hamlet's going to heaven, and Hamlet is then literally elevated at the end of the play, but he's not like the kind of person we aspire to be. I mean, he's not the kind of person I aspire to be. That we are, as always, confused about what Shakespeare's trying to say. But here's a thought. Shakespeare's not trying to say anything. I mean, he's trying to say some things, but I think that Hamlet is a play that struggles with Catholicism, which is probably why I like it so much. Hamlet is stuck between what he wants and what is expected of him and what God wants. He's stuck between like a rock and a hard place, and also like molten lava. The English tradition predating Christianity is that you have to take revenge for your family. If something bad, like murder, happens to your family, then you have an obligation to take revenge. But God is out here saying, hey, that's my business, not yours. And I think that a lot of what Hamlet does is, Hamlet the play, but also Hamlet the character does, is enacts the struggle between what is expected of us on a worldly, public plane and what is expected of us in a more private and godly, between like what is expected of us between us and God, and what we expect of ourselves, not so much what is expected of us by the people around us or by our station in life. I think his main struggle is with what he expects of himself and what God expects of him, which is on one hand, and what is expected of him on a really public level. And I think that is the most interesting struggle in Hamlet. My professor did point out that Hamlet has a lot of trouble killing Claudius for Oedipal reasons, unfortunate, and he sees Claudius as an extension of himself, which is fine. And I find that weird. Like, I find it strange. I don't necessarily think that Hamlet doesn't see himself in Claudius and then therefore has trouble killing Claudius, but not because, like, Hamlet can't kill himself. Like, Hamlet can kill himself, but I don't know that he would think of it as, like, the same as suicide. I think he would find it like a way to actually enact his suicide without actually killing himself. Because the thing about suicide is, like, all sins, this is the great thing about Catholicism, is that if you truly repent, all sins can be forgiven, but you can't repent from suicide because you've already died. And once you die, like, you can't go back. So that's a little thing that I don't think necessarily tracks. Like, Hamlet's already willing to commit murder, so, like, he's not going to be any more upset about killing Claudius because it's a suicide than he is because it's murder. In fact, he might even be more willing to do it because Claudius is everything that he doesn't like about himself. And there's lots of readings that definitely would support Hamlet seeing Claudius as, like, a terrible version of himself. That everything he doesn't like about Claudius is also something he doesn't like about himself. My professor posits that the reason Hamlet is elevated is because he has a change of attitude about himself in the fourth act of in between Act 4 and 5, and I don't know that I necessarily agree, but in Act 4 and up until Act 4, at the end of Act 3, Hamlet talks about himself as a scourge, as God's scourge, and he thinks that he has to do evil to punish evil. And, and when human beings try to be God and punish evil whenever they see it, they fail. They end up killing their girlfriend and their girlfriend's dad and their mom, and but Hamlet's "We defy augury" speech in Act 5, Scene 2, seems to show a change in thinking about himself as a tool, and instead he's just going to do what happens. He doesn't have control over who gets punished and who lives and who dies. He just has to be ready to do what God is actually asking him to do instead of whatever nonsense he was doing for the first 3 acts of the play. 3 acts. So in the first 3 acts, and then halfway through the 3rd act, Hamlet, like, doesn't do anything. And then he's like, it's just time to do whatever God says. And him agonizing over what he's supposed to be doing is what causes everything to happen. And see you soon. Thank you so much for watching. I was going to also talk about the 2 films we watched, but I'm going to post a second video where I talk about those films. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. I love you. Peace.